A child carried on the back will not know how far the journey is. The words of a Nigerian proverb that bring us into this episode of the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Alan Campbell.
I'm Garth Williams, and we are
Jamaican Dadz. Well, this program provides a functional forum for us to tackle many of the taboo topics that concern fatherhood and parenting.
And in our main discussion today, we'll be continuing our talk on the dynamics of homeschooling. But before we get there, let's fire off with the opening salvo. And in this week's opening salvo, does corporal punishment have a place in modern parenting?
Beat him! I'm kidding.
Does corporal punishment have a place in modern parenting?
You're not gonna get me in a problem now. But go ahead.
Well, so my straight up answer is yes, in a controlled way. Right?
Okay.
All right. But that's just my view.
Yes.
And I don't think it necessarily has to be something that is long term, like it go all the way through childhood, right? I think we have to, at some point, explain the purpose of a punishment, right? And the type of punishment that we're delivering, and for children to understand that, right? There are some crimes which are so egregious that it requires the palm getting wet. You understand me? With the use of an appropriate punishment device.
I wish our parents didn't know that.
But no,
because
let me tell you, and why I'm so cautious about it is because even from my own personal lived experience.
Very personal lived experience.
Yeah. And also from seeing what would have taken place with friends and colleagues and neighbors and so on, there is a thin line that is very easily crossed between corporal punishment and abuse.
Yes.
Right? But I believe, again, you have to have different types of punishments. Just like in the country, with laws, you have different types of punishment for different types of crimes, right? Or felonies even, right? So if it's extreme, say the punishment match that, yeah? And if it's lighter, then say the punishment is also aligned.
And
so
you don't think there is scope for reasoning things through? I mean, without corporal, because it specifically said corporal punishment.
Which are just beating in a Jamaica. I never want to put beating in a
Yeah. Spanking, because beating by the very nature of the word sounds abusive.
Right.
Yes.
Because.
Oh, by the way, we know he's the non-beater.
And it's hard, honestly, because of my lived experiences, not to resort to that, to tell the truth. Instinctively, I already like, slap this boy, and so forth, and all. And I realized I was very against it when my father made the comment one time, boy, I get so much trouble in a high spirit, you must send him down here, make we beat him bottom. And I'm like, don't you blank word there.
Yes.
You're not going to. And part of it is because of what I endured growing up. I mean, straight up, y'all were abusive. I'm just telling you from now. I love you dearly. It's probably what you didn't know. It's what parents know. And that's part of it. It's what a lot of the older generation of parents know. That's what them know.
We can expand your knowledge, as we have.
And I know. But yeah, you understand? And because of that, I was very determined. So maybe it is because it was so far right with them, I'm pushing so far left. Because quite possibly the appropriate place is somewhere in the middle. But me, I don't want to open that Pandora's box at all. So that's why.
For me, all right, and I've thought a lot about this over the years. So, first of all, I think that Jamaican parents, West Indian parents, culturally, we have...
Don't spare the rod and spoil the child.
Right, but very often, the rod of correction is applied not how a rod of correction should be, because the rod of correction is a rod of guidance, It's guiding the shepherd, right? Right? But here the challenge. But here the challenge though. My thing is that Jamaican, West Indian parents beat primarily to make themselves feel better.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Release anger.
why did I hit the child? I hit the child because I was angry.
Yeah.
I hit the child because what the child did made me feel angry, and hitting the child makes me feel better.
Right.
Hitting the child did not teach the child anything.
Except
Right?
hate you.
You broke the child, you told the child, don't run up and down in the house. The child run up and down in the house and broke the thing, and you are angry that the vase is broken.
Right.
And you're gonna beat the child, not to teach the child that they shouldn't run up and down in the house, but you're gonna beat the child because you broke my things and I'm angry.
Right.
And if we're honest,
spend so much money upon.
exactly,
Or you have
right?
so long, a grandma
Yeah,
favorite glass.
and so it is you're dealing with your own trauma from whatever, or you beat the child. Common reason why picnic get beaten in a Jamaica.
Nah,
Cause you shame.
Yes. Embarrassment. There's a bit of that.
In the supermarket or on the road or whatever, and you beat the child for what the elusive them will think.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't believe in using the hand to, or whatever. For me, it would be the hand. I don't believe in using the hand for those purposes. So right there, so me in the 2 years of Jackson's life, me never lick him yet because I don't. First of all, I cannot use corporal punishment to teach him anything. All I would be all I would be teaching him is when we send him to school, it's okay to lick people depending on who has the power.
Right.
And I don't want him to be going to school and having that in his communicative vocabulary.
Right.
So I'm not give him that yet. But I'm not say it is not a possibility because I think that there is room to use it. For instance, I think you are put your hand in the fire and slap you upon your hand.
Right.
I am creating a negative association. I'm creating a response to that because in the immediate instance that was necessary.
Right.
I think, yeah?
Yeah.
And other people can disagree, but I'm my picnic. You understand? So nobody come tweet me. And you will not win.
Right.
You're not gonna win it. Yeah. So I'm just saying there are instances where I think it would be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. I think. Well, my position is at the moment I think it's completely vindicated, and I'll tell you why. Because I've not had to spank my children since probably in Noel's case, age 5 or 4, and she's 12 now, and she's a very obedient child, very respectful, very mannerly. She's not afraid of me. She's not afraid of her mother. So it's not even that she's respectful and mannerly because she's afraid of her parents.
Yeah.
You understand me? She's just genuinely respectful and mannerly. Also very considerate, also very kind, right?
Definitely done it, picnic.
Yeah.
And then with Nicholas, I don't think it's an even younger age. I don't think I had to spank him beyond maybe age 3 or 4, to be honest. But part of that reason is because Noel was the first. She quickly got the new recruit in line. So she almost acted as a third parent, you know?
But you said there's another thing. There's a story that you told. And that's my other thing that I've always said, and my students know it. Everybody, like for me, there will be times when my child will say, probably be thinking, Daddy, beat me, no, please.
Yeah, instead of
Beat me, can't take it talking. You understand? Because when me done, why did you do that? Explain it to me.
Yeah.
Explain why you did it. You understand? The essay that you're going to have to write. They or the creative punishments. You're gonna hear that I'm wicked. You understand? When you're coming to me for money, and I need to see the project proposal in front of me before I give you that money. Yeah.
And that's where I am with my kids now too.
Because and I say that because Nicholas did something.
Right.
And did mark up something because he was bored. And you deal with him harsh.
Yeah.
Was it harsh? Why?
No, it was necessary.
It was necessary.
It was necessary.
I'm not gonna beat him. You understand what I'm saying? But my thing.
What? I didn't know that story.
No, there are multiple. multiple.
What did he have to clean it?
Like him did mark up with him did destroy one piece of furniture or mark up a piece of furniture.
It wasn't the furniture. It wasn't Nick. It was Noel actually. It was the floor.
No, it was Nick. This is last year. Last year.
Oh, yes.
And you took away the tablet or something.
Yes,
you took away.
Yes.
You took away so many things from him. I was like, oh my. He was like Akar, locked up.
Nick decided that he was going to decorate a couch in the house. See?
Yeah.
And I have no problem with his interior design ambitions. That's great.
Safe
Just don't
space.
don't experiment on my furniture. You understand me? We have other things that you can experiment on in the house.
Yeah.
So he lost his privileges. You understand me? So no YouTube, no TV, no tablet. You understand me?
Beat me. Just beat me under.
Right. And this kid just did not know now how to function. And I was pretty harsh in my delivery to him still, to be honest. I don't think to the extent that it was psychologically abusive. No, none of that. Emotionally abusive, what I probably did vex, but it's not abuse. You know what I mean? But my whole thing is, and them know how I operate in the house. You understand me? We give them excess amount of freedom to express themselves. If they want to run up and down, then by all means, run up and down. Right? By all means, run up and down. Because you're youth, you have energy. So, therefore, hey, we can't stop you from doing kiddish things. You're going to want to run up and down. We can't get around that.
Right.
You understand me? But, we have to draw a line somewhere. You understand me? And while I opened the program and said, yes, I believe in corporal punishment, it has a role in parenting. Again, it depends. You have to make sure, say, it's structured certain ways. So you them have to understand, say, boy, this I go warrant that. It's not just that because you foul up, then daddy and mommy I go kick, punch and thump you and all of them, something there. I mean, I believe a kick and thump have no place in it.
No, that's
you understand me? And, yeah, some strokes because you understand. You understand what I'm saying? You know, so boy, all right, yeah, you go feel a certain amount of physical pain for that something because this is just the punishment for it. You understand me? Your hands are ball in a football in a penalty box. The referee go blow a penalty. You understand what I'm saying? If you're the defending team, that's just really what it is. You understand me? Yeah, sometimes you know feel say it's warranted, but guess what? This is the punishment for this thing, and you know. I think if children
but
can
Marlon, given the fact that you're so liberal. And, you know, when in watching The Adventures of Judah, we see the liberal approach that you take. So then, what is the manifestation in your mind of punishment or discipline in that context?
I think he's very smart and knows when he messes up. So far, by the way, the look, by the way, I have the look and the handful. The look.
This is after you put on the phone, right?
No, the look. Stage 1.
Yes.
The handful is stage 2. If I ever reach stage 3, which is foot tapping, I hardly ever have to reach there. By the way, and he knows. Like this morning, him fully throw out milk on the futon. Threw it and everything, and I was like, Judah, why did you do that? And he know, because I think a lot of time them know them do something bad. So what I do for him,
it's testing an environment.
Yeah, see? Yeah. What he loses is outside time. It's a big thing for him.
Right.
So we're outside and I do him nothing do. You've lost outside time, we're going back inside. And him, you realize him love outside. So for him now, that's like taking away him tablet.
Yeah.
It works. Him no want to lose outside time. It don't work. And then,
so again, the whole thing for me is just
teaching consequences, cause and effect. I think that's what I'm getting.
That's true.
Yeah.
Cause and effect. Consequences of behavior, because look here, especially boy picnic, they need to appreciate that there are consequences for their actions.
Which is why I allow him liberal, because sometimes him drop.
It requires proper planning as well as parents.
You know, that's the difference with me, because like Jackson not drop yet.
You want to prevent the dropping?
You know, no, like I know that the drop must come, but
No, don't worry.
Yeah, it's come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming. I
No, hold on now. When I'm not home.
Yeah.
Suzanne, why you?
That's it for the opening. That's it for the opening salvo. Of course, let us know your thoughts using a hashtag at Jamaican hashtag Jamaican Dadz. With that said, we're going to take a break and return with the dynamics of homeschooling.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks, and we are very pleased to be having part 2 of a discussion that we began last week. We are looking at how to optimize the homeschooling experience. And this week, our guest is Kaysia Kerr, the CEO of the National Parenting Commission. Garth, glad to have her.
Oh yeah, we're absolutely thrilled to have Kaysia with us this time because she will add that extra layer of experience, of knowledge, of coming from the government, coming from the National Parenting Commission that we all lead. She has some eyes and she sees things through a lens that we don't always get an opportunity to see through. And obviously research. She has a benefit of research and data, so she knows how things work. So we're so happy to have you. Welcome, Kaysia.
Thank you so much, Garth, and thank you, Dennis, for the invite. Thanks.
Before we get into the specifics of this topic, the National Parenting Support Commission emphasized the need for support and structured support for parenting in Jamaica, generally speaking, and then we can get into specific to this area of discourse.
Thank you. The National Parenting Support Commission, as you mentioned, and as the name suggests, we're here to support parents. One of the things I really appreciate about the commission is that we're not regulatory, so there are no punitive actions that we take. We understand that many persons are really just doing the best that they can based on their know-how, their experiences, or based on the way they were parented. And so it's important that we give this level of support to parents. And that has been emphasized, especially now, as we're all trying to navigate this pandemic, that there are many issues that affect one's ability to parent, and there are many issues that affect parents just as people. And here we have an entity that has been set up by government to ensure that we coordinate the various supports for parents. You can imagine that we've become a conduit too for just everything. So in this pandemic, we're coordinating sometimes with food banks at the granular levels because people might have lost their jobs and they want food to feed their families. Sometimes they have an issue navigating the other bureaucratic systems of government, whether they need services through other entities. So we're that go-between to ensure that they can get the help that they need. Support is something that cannot be overstated. Many parents will tell you that they need that place that is going to be understanding and non-judgmental, so that they feel safe enough to say, look, this is where I'm deficient, and there is no judgment. You can come with honesty, and persons are equipped to help. So I think, especially at this time, it's very important that from a government standpoint, there's this entity that exists that is really here to ensure that parents get the help they need.
Just a little bit more background on the National Parenting Support Commission. How long have you been around, and what has your journey there been like?
Okay, Garth. We've been here only 8 years, so we came about because the Prime Minister, some time ago, a few Prime Ministers removed, wanted to know what was going on in the education system. So there was a task force report of 2004 that really provided some answers for the Prime Minister at the time. And he wanted to know, why were we not seeing the kinds of results based on the investment in education why are there still these gaps in education? And among the gaps was highlighted the lack of parental involvement. And so page 170 of the task force report recommended that there needs to be coordinated support for parents so that they can be better participants in education. And so we opened our doors. An act of parliament was passed in 2012, and we opened our doors in January 2013. I assumed the helm in July of 2017. So I think I'm close to 4 years, almost half the time since the commission has been in operation. And like I said before, we really are here to support parents through coordinated efforts to ensure that they're better participants in education. That involvement of a parent in the child's educational life is so important. They must stay with the child to understand learning and developmental needs and how to ensure that the child becomes the best human being he possibly can. Certainly, looking at the landscape now, we need to improve the citizenry, I believe. I think there are so many things lacking. And so parental involvement, especially in education, is one of those things that will help us to ensure that, we have persons who are going to contribute to the development of the country. Yeah.
You mentioned the importance of parental involvement. And one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is the fact that parents are now propelled into a greater relationship with their as educational stakeholders. And so by virtue of them being at home in many instances, or having to take the child to the office to put them in a room where they can do their virtual class. So in a way that previously parents would drop off the child at school and pick them up or see them when they get home, now more than ever parents are actually actively there in the classroom having an experience in class with the child. How has that changed the role of the parent in the teaching learning process?
Oh, very, very important question. I would start by saying education really was meant to provide a complex set of services. And at the end of the day, we hope that character development is what the outcome will be, so that we can have persons who are going to contribute positively to society. Fine. But on a very pragmatic level, schools were that safety net, because you're dropping off your children at school, and at least parents knew that for set hours they knew where their children were and they were being taken care of. Welcome 2020, that totally changed, and all of a sudden the home became the school and the school became the home. And there's still some amount of calibration that needs to happen, especially among our children, to understand how to accept that home is school and school is now home. And Dennis, the role of parenting has certainly changed and has been impacted, because whether you like it or not, you've had to become a better participant in the teaching learning process. No, because I talk about not just owning your own device as an initiative. No, we have to own these environments, and we have to think of the landscape of parenting. There are many different environments, but we have to own these environments and create these spaces for learning, no matter what the home looks like. And that has thrown many persons in a tailspin, not understanding how to create these spaces, but also not understanding how to give that immediate support to children, because that was really primarily the teacher's responsibility for set hours. Now we're creating school at home, where parents are supposed to be actively involved. They're supposed to be structuring the day, ensuring that the children are moving seamlessly from one subject area to the next, ensuring that they're not just looking at the tablet and the laptop, but actually being very engaged in the process. We know that our children are very savvy, they're very smart, and sometimes when you see the laptop on, they're really not in class. So the parent has now become this person who has to attend and create these spaces, as we also are telecommuting. We're working from home, and they're in the same environment. So we still have to meet our obligations for work, but we have to pay attention. and be attending and making sure that they're achieving in this new space with this new dynamic. So it's a lot on parents. Yes, go ahead, Gar.
Yeah, I just kind of want to build on that point, because we're talking now about a year plus, at least certainly one full academic year, because that's basically what this year has been, and a third or thereabout, closer probably to a half of the previous academic year, without without a lot of data necessarily available. What do you think is the effect of these, home now becoming school, school becoming home, parents who some of whom were ill-equipped to manage or oversee the learning process? What are you anticipating? What are you seeing though? What are you feeling?
Well, there is still a level of anxiety among both parents and children. That's a fact. Now, there are children who absolutely love it because it gives them an opportunity to interface with the technology, and this is their time. But there are other children who really have not been as exposed to the technology and don't necessarily have access, and they are not necessarily liking the new dynamic, this remote learning. There are children who also learn differently. Some children really have to be in front of you to grasp concepts, and they have to be there to touch things and to get an understanding of how they work in order for them to learn. And then among the parents, just creating that structure, especially in the environment where structure never existed, where a child will get up anytime he feels like, does anything he feels like, he's definitely directing his day, and there's not necessarily any accountability system that has ever been put in place. It's never part of his socialization. Those parents are finding it even more difficult, because in order for this to work and redound to the benefit of the children, it has to be structured. You have to understand that you must organize your day, and then from then it becomes routine. So the child will know what time to get up, what time to eat, what time to shower, and what time to set up the devices, so that when the teacher comes on, he's ready with all the books in place and so on. So there's still some amount of anxiety. Understanding too that there are parents who have deficits of their own, and they're not necessarily understanding the dictates of the curriculum. So in terms of just attending or trying to explain later on for reinforcement what the children have been taught, they have deficits where that is concerned. They really don't know. They might have deficits in literacy, or even so methodology would have changed, and content would have been updated, and so the currency of the information they're not familiar with, because they have not been participating in education. And so there's this gap with them, and it's frustrating, and the technology is new. We're talking about Google Suite and these different learning platforms, and even though the ministry has done well to try and help parents to understand, there are some persons who really just like the face-to-face and the one-on-one and the in-person, and this is something that they're just not comfortable with. So there is some level of disenchantment, if you will, and anxiety too with this whole new dynamic.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a quick break. You're tuned in to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We have with us CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, Kaysia Kerr, as we discuss getting the best out of your online and homeschool experience. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we are having a conversation about how to optimize your homeschooling experience, how to get the best of it if that's your choice. We're speaking with the CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, Kaysia Kerr. Kaysia, thanks for staying with us.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Let's get into the part of the conversation now where we give the parents the support from the support commission in trying to make critical decisions. And I think one of the first decisions that we need to make is
if we look at our child and to decide, is my child the kind of kid who's going to benefit from not going back to the mainstream educational system? What are the things that we are looking for to identify before you make that decision as to what the next step is?
Well, one of the things you probably want to consider is what his attainment levels have been. Uh, have you found that having had remote learning, that his grades have gone up? Have you found that he feels that he's more structured and he's able to manage this environment well? There's so many things to consider. You also perhaps want to consider situations regarding health and safety, and not necessarily as it relates to COVID, but general health and safety. Does your child have a health condition, and have you found that now that you're learning remotely, you've not had so many visits to the doctor? Have you found that his health has improved? So there are many things to consider before you take that decision, whether or not you want to continue formal homeschooling, what the benefits are. One thing I can tell you that my experience has been is that persons who have been exposed to that way of teaching and learning, when they come into the public school system, we've found that they're very structured, which means they're very disciplined. That's something I have never, certainly in my experience, found them with any social deficits, because they are exposed through the homeschool network to co-curricular activities and opportunities to interact just the same. The homeschooling network, as I'm calling it in Jamaica, is very sophisticated, and it is a part of the Independent Schools Association network or suite of opportunities for learning. Of course, they're independent schools, but the homeschool falls under that umbrella group as well. And I have found that the children who, when they would have left that particular structure and come into public school, they're very disciplined, very structured, and they have no social deficits. So I think you'd have to consider, how has my child really benefited from this remote learning environment? Have I found that he has done exceptionally well? Have I found that I am now better organized and I'm in a position to help him or her even more while at home? So these are some of the things you'd have to consider. And then having considered all the factors, maybe what you would need to do now is think about finances, because like I said, it's a very sophisticated network in Jamaica. And homeschooling, you have different.
Sophisticated, is that a euphemism for expensive?
Yes. It can be costly because you have different tutors who come into the home at different times to teach your child, and it's a one-on-one experience. And like I said, there are some children who will learn differently. Some love the large group environment, and some definitely need that one-on-one. That's where they thrive. And some children also need accelerating. There's some children who they're just naturally bright. They have a natural propensity to grasp things so easily. And maybe this is another option for them if you want to accelerate them, if you want to push them. But you have different tutors coming in at different times of the day in different subject areas. It's also an opportunity for you to customize your child's learning. So that's something you need to consider. What if you believe that there are things you want to be more emphasized based on what you see your child interested in or what his natural inclinations are, and so you believe that homeschool will give you a better opportunity, that instead of having, I don't know, let's say physics 3 times for the week, it's something you want to concentrate on because you're seeing that your child has a natural inclination. And so through the homeschooling option, the child would be exposed to more of this. So there's several things to consider. And as I'm on the floor,
is one of the things to consider then,
yes.
is one of the things to consider the constructs that we're talking about, because there's a nuance that you're bringing out in the conversation where Are we talking about homeschooling, or are we talking about now a raft of online learning options that have emerged since the shift towards online pedagogy? So we're now seeing where there are schools that are entirely online. Does that count as homeschooling, or is that a different construct that we are introducing into the conversation?
Well, it's different. So online learning is remote learning, learning away from the four walls that you used to commute to, that we call a school. So this is remote learning. Homeschooling is a whole other structure that happens where you have different tutors coming to the home. Now, one would say that the homeschooling concept could also include remote learning where you go online. But for the most part, homeschooling is face to face. You have that physical contact with the tutors, and they're coming into the home at different times, and it's structured that way. There's also, through that structure, opportunities for co-curricular activities just the same. Remote learning option could also be embedded in that. But what has happened with the emergence of this hybrid system is that you have this online teaching and learning that we now term remote learning. So you're learning away from the physical building, and you're at home or at a place where you can get access to online tutoring and learning. Yeah.
But then, so they're different, but they're not that different, because you make reference to teachers, different subject subject matter specialists, teachers coming in, tutors coming into the home physically, but then that is also delivered. That can also be delivered online, where it
Right.
is
So when
different
I was
teachers.
going through it, I thought, but the difference is how I guess it is structured, because in homeschooling there are more opportunities and options available. We talk about structured co-curricular experiences, so it at the home, and it's more customized learning, unlike remote learning where we have a prescribed curriculum. So the Ministry of Education would dictate that these are the things you're supposed to learn. With a homeschool environment, the parent is actually taking the decision that these are the things I want my child to learn. So the curriculum is also more customized.
And okay, which now leads me to another question, because how then do you ensure, from a Ministry of Education perspective, how does the ministry ensure that children who are homeschooled stay apace with the curriculum which they would have outlined for a particular year of learning? And the same thing for the parents. How do you ensure, if you're going the route of homeschooling, not necessarily just the online learning or the remote learning now, how do you ensure that you are moving in tandem with the ministry's outlined curriculum?
Well, even through the homeschool network, the Ministry of Education is still legally bound to ensure that children are being given the right opportunities to promote and we're promoting their best interests. So there is an independent schools unit that monitors all independent schools and also the homeschool. What I do know is that sometimes you have a mixture of curricula. So you do have elements of what the Ministry of Education dictates, and then the parent gets to customize, but they are monitored through the independent schools unit. There is a registration process, so we still have to account for those children, because children have a right to education. And remember, we're signatory to the UN conventions on the rights of the child. And so we have to make sure that they're also being monitored and that the children are not disenfranchised through this other option of learning.
So you mentioned a network, and I might say I have this kind of a child who I think is going to do best in a homeschooling environment. I would like to design this kind of a curriculum for that child. I'm not so sure, because I'm not a specialist in curriculum development, even if And many people who believe in homeschooling maybe have some kind of an educational background, but certainly not necessarily curriculum development.
Yes.
How do you go? Is there somewhere where, if this is what you're contemplating, you can go here and network with other people to maybe have ideas of, this could be the type of curriculum for my child. Maybe my child has special needs. Of you mentioned, maybe they're quote unquote gifted, or maybe they have certain learning challenges. So how do I find that support in search of a curriculum tailored for my child?
Well, I know the Jamaica Independent Schools Association would have several curricula, and they would also be the best persons who would guide on that, because like I said, the whole homeschool network falls under their umbrella group. But there's also the independent schools unit in the Ministry of Education. They could also guide you on where to access different curricula that meets your needs and your child's needs. And also, just as a parent, you perhaps want to find out who the curriculum specialists are, and whatever you find, also run it by those specialists to see whether or not it is something that you want to introduce into your child, that it's going to meet the specific needs, and whether or not it's even age and stage appropriate. So there, as a parent, you also have to continue your advocacy for your children. It's also within your interest to make sure you are not just accessing material by Googling, but also getting to those specialists to ensure that whatever it is that you want will meet the needs of your children. And of course, there's a National Parenting Support Commission. Remember, I said we're that go between. So where you're having problems, you can come to us and we will do the legwork for you. We will set up meetings, we will do research, we will help you along the way, because we're here to ensure that our children are protected, loved, their best interests are always promoted, and at the end of the day, they'll develop to ensure that they meet their God-given potential.
So then let me ask, I'm trying to ask this in a politically correct way. I'm not going to mention any religious group in particular, but let me say that I have found a particular faith. And in finding that particular faith, I say that the particular being to which I pray has told me that I need to remove my child from this education system, and that I need to gather together with people of like faith and to have instruction of our own in the bush. How, first of all, is that legal? And second of all, I mean, clearly not all homeschooling is sanctioned by the ministry.
All right, well, Kaysia,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to think about that. We're going to take hold the thought. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dadz very good question, by the way, Dennis. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We're discussing getting the best out of your homeschooling and online schooling experience with the CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, Kaysia Kerr. She will respond to Dennis's question right after these messages. Please stay with us.
We're back here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We are having a conversation, if you're just joining us, we're having a conversation about how we can optimize the online or homeschooling experience. We're speaking with the CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, Kaysia Kerr. Kaysia, before the break, I asked you a question about, that there are different levels to this, or there are different forms that online schooling can take. How do you know if your form that you're contemplating is approved?
Okay, so once you've decided to homeschool your child, there is a registration process. You have to contact the Independent Schools Unit at the Ministry of Education, because we must account for children. With that said, you mentioned a person who might opt to take a child, I don't know, in the bush to and call this school through the homeschooling option. There is a school that I remember just watching this on television actually, where school is actually out there in nature in the forest. I totally forgot the name of that kind of schooling, but they actually embrace the kind of schooling where children interact with their environment. That if you're teaching about air or soil or whatever it is, they're providing that experience. So there is experiential learning that is actually very effective, and the children do exceptionally well. You're teaching about animals and the animal kingdom, then they're picking up earthworms and so on. So there is that way of teaching that has done really well for children in terms of their learning and their attainment. There are agencies set up by government for monitoring, and even in our ministry, we do have a cadre of education officers whose responsibility is to monitor whether or not that monitoring would extend to them traversing in the bush, where somebody might opt to give this child this kind of experience, is perhaps questionable. But with that said, what we really want to do is to ensure that whatever option that's on the table, it redounds to the benefit of the children. So that person, if they opt to give the child that kind of experience, then you would have to prove what curriculum you're using. You'd have to prove who is teaching the child, whether or not they're competent. You'd have to show that the child is developing according to how he's supposed to develop according to his age and stage, and that you're not seeing any deficits or any risk to his well-being being out there in the bushes. So there are many things that as a government who is responsible for all children would have to ensure, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure children are safe, they're healthy, and that they're learning. But that's an interesting question that came from you, Dennis. I don't know that the Ministry of Education would have an issue if the child is learning according to or progressing according to his age and stage of development. And as long as you can prove that even if there are gaps in learning, these are not gaps that are way outside of the norm, that with time those gaps will be narrowed, then I suspect that it would be okay. As long as the child is safe and he's progressing, there's no risk to his health, then I don't know that it would be an issue.
I want to follow up on that, because there then must be an approach which is taken. You did make mention of contacting the independent school section of the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
Should you want to go that route. Just kind of take us through a checklist, if you will, of things that parents need to ensure that are in place, those steps through approval. So you decided that, hey, listen, homeschooling is what I really want to do. What's the checklist?
Well, first of all, you'd have to prove why this is the option that you want to
How do you prove that?
Well, you'd perhaps want to show that my child, based on who he is going to benefit more from being in this homeschool setting. For me, we're always going to promote the government service because of the rigor that we put our systems through. So if you're going to opt for homeschooling, you have to perhaps present a profile of your child. Who is your child in terms of his learning, his capabilities, his interests. You'd perhaps want to also show the deficits in our system and how your child would not be benefiting from what is out there, and perhaps through customized learning, this is a better option for your child.
Would that also include some kind of diagnostic test done by the ministry, in addition to the profile you presented and your case?
Well, I don't know that we would do the diagnosis ourselves, because then you're thinking of an independent option. But if you would have done the diagnosis, you'd have gone to, I don't know, one of those services to have your child diagnosed or to look at what his profile is, then that certainly would help. Then you would take all of that. But you also need to also show that where you are would be conducive for this kind of setup. So you need to prove that you have made contact with these are the persons who would be on board to teach your child. You need to have evidence of curricular support and the finances necessary to support your child through this process. You also need to prove that your child himself is open to this kind of engagement. Now it depends. I guess if you start very early, then your child really doesn't necessarily have the vocabulary to even express how he or she feels. But if it's a child who is older, you'd want to also prove that your child is on board and the child doesn't feel as if this is going to be to his or her detriment, because the child must have a voice and a say in the whole process too. And then there's paperwork certainly at the ministry that you'd have to fill out. But certainly these are some of the considerations for parent. If you can produce a profile as to who your child is and really prove that this way is going to be better, because at the end of the day, we just want to know that our children are not going to be disenfranchised based on your choices. It can't just be that it's about your preference, but you really need to show that this is going to be what's beneficial for my child.
And my guess is that process is not frustrating or unnecessarily difficult.
No, we have found the independent schools unit to be very efficient. It's a smaller unit by comparison to the other units in the ministry, but the persons are very hands-on. They have a whole lot of information, and they have really worked with parents over the years to guide them and to make sure that at the end of it all, their children benefit from education. I think that's what we all want.
And I can hear somebody asking online, or probably shouting at the radio, not necessarily shouting, but asking the radio, how do you determine or evaluate the progress made by students at the end of the year? So of course, you have your end of term exams, etc. What's that process like when you go the route of homeschooling? How do you evaluate the
individual teachers who would be a part of that process would also do their evaluations. And as a parent, you would want to hear from those experts whether or not they think the child is progressing according to what's normal or even beyond what's normal. But those experts who you'd have delivering the content and teaching your children will have to be able to prove that there are no deficiencies, no deficits have gone this route. But you also want to look at other areas, not just academics. You want to look at the child's social being. Is he more withdrawn? Are you realizing that he's really missing contact with other children? What are you noticing as a parent at home? So it's not just about academics. You want to make sure that there are no compromises in terms of just how his social upbringing as well.
One of the advantages of the public system is that it's broken into regions, and you have oversight and quality control through education officers who are assigned to particular schools in particular regions. Is there oversight so that you can have continuous assessment of homeschooling options while they're happening, so that you can say, hey, you're off course. You need to get on, you need to, that quality control, is that there?
Right. So then again, it comes back to the independent schools unit. So they have officers who monitor the progress and who do the kinds of monitoring that would happen in the public school with that cadre of education officers. So you do have officers in the unit whose remit it would be to ensure that the children's welfare and well-being would not be compromised through this option for teaching and learning. So they do monitoring, they do close checks. I know they have regular meetings, just like other meetings that would be held at the quality education circle level with the regular education officers in the system. And of course, the Independent Schools Association too would also have its own checks and balances in place, I'm sure, to monitor the progress of those children and to make sure that comparatively they're not at a disadvantage.
And this is a dad-centric podcast. We're not ashamed of that. What in the grand scheme of things, I mean, different households are run differently. In some households, wife is the Minister of Education. But what can dads do? What I mean, from a parenting support commission perspective, how important is fathers and fatherhood in the education process?
I believe it's so important. I think when fathers show that education is important, then you're telling your children to place emphasis and importance on it. I don't know if this is causal, but I do have worry sometimes about the fact that we do have single parent homes that are in the majority in this country that are run by females, and whether or not there is a correlation between that and the number of boys that we see going on to tertiary education. I mean, over the years, we've seen majority of females graduating from colleges being females in Jamaica. And sometimes I wonder if there is a link between those. So if there is a home where you see a father placing emphasis on education, then chances are the impetus that some of our boys have to get out and get money, they feel that they need to go and work earlier than they really should be, because they should be in school developing and building their skill sets. Maybe they would stay a little longer. And so we would have a society where we have more skilled people and more educated people and so on. I think it's a good way to model for children that, you know, as fathers, education is important and it's very transformative, and you really are trying to develop a total person. So I think it's important that dads show not just the interest but commitment to the process. Be there for the entire stage. When they see you going through and staying the course and trusting the process, they're learning from you that too is important.
Yeah. Listen,
Kaysia, that question. Yes.
Thank you so much, Kaysia. Listen, we really could go on and on, but time is limited in terms of what we're able to broadcast. But this won't be the last time we'll be calling on you. But thanks again for your support in joining us. And you shared a world of information. Now you've got me even thinking again about going the homeschooling route, because my kids love it here. You know, they miss their friends, but they genuinely do enjoy what's going on from
There's
a
really
homeschooling.
Something to think about, Garth.
Yeah,
Because it's an option. And we really just want our children to be the best of themselves. Congratulations, gentlemen, on the podcast. It really has been good. And I like when education is front and center.
Thank you so much. All right, you tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We're going to take a quick break and come back and close the show. So please stay with us.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We have been looking at the dynamics of homeschooling. Very interesting topic, especially now, given the dynamics of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's changed a lot of people's minds. Once upon a time, homeschooling. Me now homeschool, I wouldn't do that to them. Now,
it's a different vibe.
It's a whole different reality.
Well, I'm not sure it's that we want it, but it's what.
No, it is what is. It is the reality, and I won't use the P word that you hate. The one that you hate.
What?
Pivot. I said I won't use it.
I
said I won't use it.
I thought you meant
Anyway, that's all the time we have for the program, Garth.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we want to hear from you. Send us an email at JamaicanDadsPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks to Tashai Grant and the entire production team that make us look and sound so good. Until next time, by the way, before we go, follow us and just communicate with us online. Connect with us on social at Jamaican Dadz, or if you're on Twitter, the Jamaican Dadz. Use the hashtag Jamaican Dadz. It's all but said. And we're out of here until next time. Take care.
All right.